Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from, and welcome to another Office Hours. My name is Dan Vega, and I'm joined, as always, by my good friend, my coworker, and now the famous VMware Explore presenter, DaShaun. How are you doing, my friend?
Yes, I'm jazzed to be here. Thank you so much. Yeah, that was quite a event, quite a time, but good stuff all the way around. It's a good time to be a developer.
Yeah.
An excellent time to be a Spring developer.
I think that's a really good place to start because I wasn't there. So fill me in. How was VMware Explore? What was the crowds like? Was it great to be back in person? I'm sure it was.
Like this is like a long time ago, and I'm still I'm still riding the wave. It really was an event. It really was amazing to see all the people and our community, you and me, like our community showed up there. And yeah, like in my head, I got this vision of, DevOps, how people are going to communicate. And Kelsey Hightower did a really good job of kind of explaining like, hey, we've got this new abstraction and it's called Kubernetes, and it's going to, it might just be the thing that kind of brings dev and ops together,
Yep.
Yeah, peanut butter and jelly, chocolate and peanut butter. Yeah,
Man, I've been a huge fan of Kelsey Hightower's for as long as I can remember, and I was at home. You were there. I was just at home watching the live stream, and then to see Kelsey talk, and then out comes DaShaun. You get the fist bump, and you're right up after Kelsey. That had to be a pretty cool moment.
that was the first time I ever met him in person, and yeah, it was a big deal. It was definitely a big deal because he's one of those people that on my journey to here. He's one of those people that was, his YouTube videos, his talks, they kind of set the stage. They helped clarify. Everybody's got their own way of learning, and some people connect with people differently. And he's just somebody that I connected with and did a lot for me on my journey. So yeah, it was really, really a wonderful experience.
Cool. I see we do have some questions coming in already. We will get to those. Anything else you kind of want to touch on, or should we just get into kind of what's new in the community here?
Things I want to touch on, just over the last couple of weeks, you and I have had some wonderful conversations, and we've had a lot of interest in this little show. I'm excited about it getting a little more consistent. So for everybody, yeah, we'll get more regular, especially in this time of the year as we ramp up to SpringOne. We want to make sure that everybody's got unlocked, so that when there's all the new stuff that's coming around the corner later this year, that everybody's ready to consume it.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And we don't always have to show up at the same day, same time, but that may help folks if we're kind of on the same schedule to know like this is coming up. We were talking about this before the show too, getting that next one scheduled right after this show so that folks know when that is. I think that's something you and I can do better at, and we'll get better at that. So we're going to schedule next week's right after this show, so that'll be up. And yeah, I think just getting more consistent will help people understand that there is a place for them to show up and ask their questions. So I'm glad you mentioned SpringOne too. We have been talking lately. We have a workshop coming up at SpringOne on getting started with Spring Boot.
I'm absolutely not jacked about it. I'm not super looking forward to that at all.
I am jazzed about that one. I am so excited about that. I already started putting kind of an outline together of what I was thinking. So I know we're going to start to put that together, as early as this week, which is good for us. I don't want to get to November and have to put this together. So I think this is a good time to get this going.
Yeah, and that's actually something. Hey, if you're in the audience and you're listening, what would you like to see in a Spring Boot workshop? Like, let us know so we don't forget anything. There's so much in the Spring ecosystem. It's hard to pick and choose what you deliver. So yeah, feedback.
Yeah, and I think that's a great idea too. I think once we get an outline together, we'll bring that to this show. This is a chance for us to get what we're working on out in the open. So we will share that. We'll see what people say. The only problem I'm having is it's only 2 hours. Like I need like 4 to 8 hours to go through what's in my head. So I'm trying to cut it down already to 2 hours.
We talked to you about that. There's got to be some way that we can.
Yeah, I don't know. The good news is I submitted this same thing to another conference, which I don't know if I told you, but if we get accepted there, that's 4 hours. So that's a little bit more. So,
Well, I did just see you do a REST API in 60 seconds today. So maybe 2 hours is enough.
Yeah, I mean, 60 seconds, 2 hours. We'll fall somewhere in between there. Cool. All right. So if you're new around here, what we're gonna do is just take a look at. We like to talk about what's new in the Spring ecosystem this week. We'll do that by taking a look at the calendar. We'll take some time to talk about this stuff. We'll take some time to jump into the developer center, the blog, see what's out there. We'll talk about if DaShaun and I have anything we kind of want to show off. I got a lot to talk about in the security world. I know DaShaun's got a lot going on too, so we'll see what we can show off there. And then, as always, please get your questions in. We'll see if we can't talk about those as well. So we are starting here at calendar.spring.io. Every time I show this off, people are like, wow, I didn't know that existed. And so this is a good calendar of just kind of what's happening, what's getting released in the Spring world. So here we are on the week of the 12th. Today is the 13th. You can see what's being released today or this week. So we have a lot of Micrometer releases yesterday, things to do with observability. We have some things going on with Reactor, Project Netty, Spring Cloud Data Flow, STS, which is Spring Tool Suite. And then towards the end of the week on Thursday, we have Spring Framework 5.3.23. A big one, which is Spring Framework 6.0 Milestone 6. So I think this, in coordination with what's happening next week with Spring Boot 3.0 Milestone 5, is what we've been looking forward to, because this is going to have those native bits in there. Well, you won't have to go in and add them yourself. So is that, I'm sure I'm reading your mind here, but is that what's kind of popping off the calendar to you?
So the big things that are like in my hands working are the latest version of Spring Cloud. I think it came out last week. And yeah, taking that for a spin. But yeah, nice. We got lots of stuff coming. Everybody's working on Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3. And there's a lot of interest already. There's a lot of interest building up. People are excited about what's coming. And yeah, and hearing the differences of, hey, we have these new modern workloads, and we'd like to be able to tackle them with Spring. And we're going to be doing that. And like, I'm not counting down the days, but yeah, it's days. It's not months away. It's
really, I can't believe it's here.
Yeah.
Let me just pop this question up, and because I couldn't read it over there. So it says, hi, Dan and DaShaun. I just started watching this morning your video from SpringOne about Spring Data Redis for Redis 6.2, the community edition. And some minutes ago, made a PR to Spring Data Redis repo to improve the documentation with the differences between these two methods.
Yep.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, thank you.
Yeah. It's pretty awesome. That's for anybody kind of new to trying to get into open source. This is one of the best ways to do so. If you don't understand the complexity of a project, but you do understand documentation, you do understand the frustrations of reading documentation and not understanding something, send in a PR of hey, I think this would make this much clearer, much easier to understand if it looked like this. So great way to get involved with open source.
Absolutely.
Hi, everyone. I hope you're doing well. Thanks, Anas. I hope you're doing well as well.
Yeah.
And our friend Scott. Hey, everyone.
Good to see you. I actually got to meet Scott in person too.
And I saw that.
To work with Scott a lot more in the future. Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I figured I would pop over to the Tanzu Developer Center. Personally, I just want to, since it's been a while since the last time we've been here, if you go over to Learn and you go over to Guides, there are a bunch of free guides on here. Again, this is not costing you any money. These are just great things to like go through and learn. There's a whole bunch of content in here. And since we last talked, I added a new one. So I have a Spring for GraphQL security guide. So this guide, I actually like, I'm a big dark mode person, but when it comes to like text like this, sometimes I like the light mode better. This guide just walks you through how to kind of secure your GraphQL APIs. So if that's something you're interested in, go ahead and check that out. But again, I always like to mention the Tanzu Developer Center. We have guides, workshops, videos, blog articles, whole bunch of free content. Go ahead and check that out. That's worked on by a lot of the advocates and the engineers. So go ahead and take a look at that.
Holy stuff. In the pipe too.
All right. Do you have anything you want to get into, or do you want me to get into some?
I'm excited to see your stuff.
Okay. I think where I'll start then is I spent so we had a shorter week last week because of holiday, and everybody got a nice day off after VMware Explore. So it was a shorter week last week. But I spent the better part of last week and the week before working on something that that came up. So I did a video a couple weeks back on the changes in Spring Security. So we know that the web security configure adapter abstract class has been deprecated. So if you're going to make Spring Security configuration changes, you should do so by creating a bean of type security filter chain. So I got in, and that was kind of news to me too, because I haven't touched Spring Security stuff in a little while. So I was getting caught up like the rest of you on like some of those changes. So I made a video on that, and a lot of the questions I got were, cool, how do I secure my APIs, in context with the one I did on GraphQL? How can I secure my REST APIs with JWTs? And I said, okay, this is going to be fun, because I have gone down this path a couple of years ago. We had to do this for the bootcamp I was working at. We secured a bunch of APIs, and we went down the route that everybody else goes down. So if you do a search for this, you're going to basically get a bunch of articles and a bunch of videos that are pretty much clones of each other. They are very confusing, and I'm not trying to put any of these tutorials down. Some are very well written, some of them are very well produced. But to follow these it's really confusing. It's like, why? I started thinking like there has to be an easier way to do this, because nobody wants to do this. It's really hard to follow. You're basically copy and pasting code because there's just so much to do. And it involved creating a custom security filter chain to add on to what's already happening. And so I said, there has to be a better way to do this. And as I said in my article and the video that I created, I did what anybody with access to the Spring Security team would do. I asked them, because, if anybody's going to know, they're going to know. And so I asked them, and sure enough, again, working at VMware is awesome, because not only do we work with so many smart people, everybody's very open to kind of sharing. So a bunch of people got back to me and said, yeah, these are the things that you really want to look at. And so I ended up writing an article. I ended up doing a video. This video ended up being like 45 minutes long. And even at that point, that 45 minutes is a simplified version of what you need to do. This is much easier than the approach of creating a custom security filter chain. So I just want to walk through a couple things in this article, then I'll show you some code. We're not going to write any code together, but I'll show it to you so that you have an idea of what you need to do. So again, they got back to me and said, hey, yes, Spring Security has built-in support for JWTs using OAuth 2 Resource Server. So Resource Server is something you can use right in your application without having to use an authorization server. You can use self-signed JWTs. So if you're not familiar with what JWTs are, or what this kind of application architecture might be, let's say you have a client and you're making a call to a REST endpoint. So we have a Spring Boot application. It has a bunch of different REST APIs like products, orders, customers. You make a call. If we include Spring Security, we basically lock everything down. So if you try to call that, it's going to return a 401. It's unauthorized. What JWTs are is basically an encoded set of claims. They're JSON property key value pairs that make up this JSON object, and basically consists of the header, payload, and a signature. So you can read more up on JWTs. Oh, I wonder why these images aren't showing up. We'll
Thanks,
fix
Joe.
that.
It blurs to me.
Wonder what's going on here. But what you want to do is make a request over to the application with some login credentials. In this case, we were using, what's going on? In this case, we were using a basic authentication. So you send some request credentials over, and then what you'll get back, if you're authenticated, is a JSON Web Token. So that JWT then is stored on the client, and every subsequent request that you need to make, you send that along with it. And so that is basically your authentication. So how do you do that in Spring? So you include the OAuth 2 resource server. You don't need Spring Security because OAuth 2 resource server includes a lot of that. And then I'll just kind of show what the application looks like.
I'm going to drop and I'm going to take some notes and I'm going to answer. There was another question over here. I'm going to see if we can whip something up around this one. So yes, no, we saw your question and I'm going to hand it over to you.
Okay, cool. Thanks. So I have the way I did this was I just created a simple home controller. This particular one, home controller, is we want to lock this down and we want somebody to have to authenticate against that. The way that we do that is we start with the security config. Again, the web security configure adapter class is deprecated. So the way you do this now is you create a security configuration. It's marked with @configuration. It's marked with @enable web security. And what we do is we come in here and we set up some HTTP security. So we disable cross-site request forgery. We set up our authorized requests, which basically says, hey, I want to make sure that any request outside of /token, you need to be authenticated to access it. We turn off session management because we're not creating cookies. We don't need a session. And then this is the exciting part. So the OAuth 2 resource server, we can go ahead and set this up using the OAuth 2 resource server configure. And this class is provided to us. And when we do that, it wires up a bear token authentication filter, which is what accepts that bear token and then figures out what to do with it. And when you do that, you can set up one of the following. And one of them is a JWT. So this enables JWT encoded bear tokens. And once you do that, so we've enabled JWT. We're still using HTTP basic. We build that. We set up a particular username in here. Again, I go through the 45 minutes of this in the video, so I'm not going to do that here. But once you do that, you need to set up something called a JWT decoder. So in the other articles and tutorials I found, again, you had to set up a security filter chain, and then you had to bring in a third-party library to do the decoding and encoding. Because we're bringing in OAuth 2 resource server here, we actually get Spring Security OAuth 2 Jose, and in here you'll see Nimbus Jose JWT, which is that package that we're going to use to create a decoder and an encoder. So I talk about this in the article. If you're new to JWTs, one of the things that you really need to understand is that there are two ways to sign a JSON Web Token. You can do so using a shared secret, which is a symmetric key, or an asymmetric key, which is using the private key of a private public pair. So here's some definitions here. If you hear people about signing JSON Web Tokens with symmetric or asymmetric, that's what this is. There are pros and cons to each. Again, especially if you get into a distributed architecture, you really don't want to use shared secrets, because then if anytime you have to update the secret, you have to update it in every location that's using it. Better to kind of use public-private key pairs. So that's what I did in this article. I walked through how to create those. I'm storing those here in resources certs. So I have a public and a private. And with that, you can use an encoder and a decoder to go ahead and create and decode those JWTs, those JSON Web Tokens. So if we go ahead and start this application, and everything looks right. If I go into the terminal and I try to make a request to 8080, we should see that we are getting a deny. So here it is, deny 401. So what I want to do is first, there is a auth controller that has a method called, or a mapping for /token. And this is what's going to do the authentication. So it's going to take in authentication. Again, we're using HTTP basic at this point. It's going to use this token service to go ahead and generate a token, a JWT token, and then pass that back to the caller. So, I walked through kind of like what we're doing here and how to go ahead and test this out. You can test it out in Postman, but we can also test it out right here. Just, whoops. So I'm making a post to 8080/token with my authentication. And what that's going to do now is that response is going to be a 200. It's going to return the JWT token. So now what I can do is make a request to /8080, but this time I can pass the authorization header. And this is going to be a bearer token with that JWT. And if I go ahead and hit that, we are now getting a 200 with that token. So again, if you just call 8080 without that token, you're going to get a deny. So you basically are storing that on the client and passing that every subsequent request. So that is the gist of what I worked on. Again, there's an article to go along with this on my blog at danvega.dev at the top of this, or on YouTube. You can find the video that accompanies this, that we walk through this. Again, 45 minutes, probably could have cut it down a little more, but I tend to over-explain things when they're complicated to me, so that hopefully you understand them as well. So yeah, this was fun to work on. Again, I think the biggest thing for me was like having the, being able to ask someone like, hey, this seems like there's an easier way to do this. And I said this in the article, and you may not, for those of you watching out here live or on the replay, you may not have access to, all of the engineers at VMware that get to work on this every day, but you do have access to us. And so these are the times to bring these types of questions to us. Like, Dan, I'm trying to secure my REST APIs with JWTs, and everywhere I look, it's very confusing. I don't understand why this is such a confusing process. This should be something that's easier to do. And if you would have brought that to me, this is the kind of route that I would take with that. So ask away your questions. Even if we can't answer them here live, we can ask the right people and put content like this out there. The more content that we can get out there that answers the questions that everybody has, I think the less confusion people will have when they get into like building these real world applications.
Awesome. I'm going to try to address this one. Hey, how does the health checks with Actuator? So the nice thing is yeah, we're in the Spring ecosystem. Adding that Actuator to your Spring Boot project, it does a few really cool things. That health check endpoint is going to show up under the Actuator. You can enable it or disable it. If you add another downstream service like a database using one of the provided starters, you'll automatically get a health check. I didn't have enough time to stand up a quick demo, but I will definitely do that for the next show. And my database, for example, my health check endpoint will say, yes, I'm up and running. If my database is not available, that'll be part of the health check. If I use that starter, then it'll say, hey, yes, you're up and running, but you cannot reach the database. This is the type of automatic, connecting of the dots and the plumbing that you get out of Spring Boot. You can actually make your own health checks and wire those up. So there's a setup that allows you to say, hey, maybe it's a third-party resource, something that you're connected to another API, for example. You can connect and say, hey, I can't reach that API. There's a difference between being up and ready to do work. So that health check idea is pretty powerful, and it changes a little bit as you get into Kubernetes, because Kubernetes has this idea of up and ready, and there's actually two different endpoints that are made available, but also included in that actuator. So hopefully that gives you enough to kind of wrap your head around it. If not, ask more questions. And and I will make sure that we do a good demo around that for the next show.
Cool. I got one here that maybe you can answer.
Absolutely. So first of all, awesome. Thanks for coming back. We know that you're pretty regular on the show. Using Spring Native, we like that we've got customers, we got people that are using Spring Native. One of the things that you're doing right now is you're using that native profile. If you've added that experimental project in Spring Boot 2.x, you are using that -p native profile in order to do your AOT compilation moving forward. What you're going to get in Spring Boot 3 is that native profile is going to exist automatically for you in the parent POM. So you won't see it in your project's POM file, but it will be included in the parent POM. So you're still going to do the whatever clean build or Spring Boot run, but you're going to give it that -p native profile that exists in the parent POM and is already there. So the transition from your native bits to the Spring Boot 3, one of the milestone versions, is your POM is going to be a little bit cleaner, but you're still going to do the same steps. You're going to use that -p or that native profile.
Cool.
That helps.
All right, I got another one here that I can go into. So I think I'm going to answer this. Let's just talk about it first. So regarding GraphQL security, I was thinking of pushing security concerns to Spring Cloud Gateway. I think it can help to couple where authorization and authentication is done. The cons is if I move to a new service, there can be a higher operational work and infrastructure costs, any other pros and cons. So I talked about this in the JWT video as well. So we are using self-signed JWTs to secure our REST APIs in that tutorial. One of the questions I posed to the Spring security team was, hey, when is that not okay? When do I need to move to start thinking about something else like Okta or Spring Authorization Server, right? And I got two really good answers from that for the JWT side, and then I'll answer that one. So when you reach the point where the trade-offs for self-signed JWTs are not acceptable, an example might be when you want to introduce refresh tokens. The other one that Rob Winch gave me was I'd add that a distinct authorization server makes more sense when you have more than one service. You want to be able to harden security. Isolating something as critical as authentication provides value because the attack surface is reduced. So that same concept is going to apply here. If you have a distributed architecture and you have multiple services, something like authorization and authentication is not something you want to reproduce in multiple services. One, it's a lot more to reproduce. That's a lot of work to reproduce. But two, you're putting something out there that could, as critical as security, that if you had a hole in it, you have 6 holes now and not 1 hole. So if you want to harden security, you could do it in one place and not 6 different places. So absolutely, when you move to a distributed architecture, you want to put that in one place. So Spring Cloud Gateway as an edge service, great fit for that. There are pros and cons to every decision as you move to a distributed architecture. Whether it's security or anything, there are going to be cons, like things that the trade-offs that you're going to have to suffer, right? Like if you have code, you might be duplicating code in different services. And that's just, part of the nature. I think the pros always are going to outweigh the cons when it comes to something as important as security, though. So I would definitely, if you haven't tried it yet, I think I would try to move to that. And don't take my word for it. Move to that. Do a little bit of an experiment at work, if at home, whatever you're working on there, and see for yourself, and then kind of weigh those pros and cons to see which route you should go.
I agree with all of that. It becomes just an easier way to think about security as your system grows. I definitely have seen it simplify my concerns.
Your last video was great, Dan. We definitely need more stuff like that. Keeps us up to date with the newest approach on certain things. Many resources on such topics are quite old. And this is something DaShaun and I have taken to heart. Being on tour this year on the SpringOne tour, we heard a lot of the same requests from everyone. Like one thing came up in one of our presentations about testing. It's like, hey, I go search for how to do this test and I have 10 different results. Some of them are fairly recent, but some of them are old. And I'm not sure which approach is the best practice, the new practice, which way to go. So yeah, a lot of that is on us to get that information out there and help you. And hopefully shows like this can do that.
Typically when I'm developing, when I run into something that seems confusing or too difficult, my default setting is this feels too difficult. And
Yeah.
somebody surely has faced this before, and surely there's something, an easy path to go to. And we want to be the people that help you find those shortcuts, easy path, better path.
I mean, especially in the Spring world, that's why these Spring projects exist. If these are very difficult to do, then just work with the low-level infrastructure. Like you don't need Spring, right? Like This is what Spring projects are providing to you is giving you that abstraction to make things easier. So, I have not finished Spring Security JWT blogger video, but looks so fresh and interesting. Thank you very much. As I mentioned in the comment, it would be great to make a follow-up video with some real stuff connecting into a DB and using roles and passwords, hashing, salting. So yeah,
take it further.
Yeah. So that was, again, I think I mentioned at the beginning of the video that this was the starting line, not the finish line, because it was a 45-minute video already. So that was a starting line. You're going to have to change things to adapt to your requirements. So we're using HTTP but basic auth in there. So you may want to switch to a username and password authentication. At some point, you're probably pulling those users from an LDAP system, a database. There is an example in there of using some type of authority because the scope gets attached to the JWT, and I set the scope to the user's authority. So there is an example. If you look in there, if you look in that repo, there is an example of that. So check that out.
Yeah, this has been excellent. We want to hear where you're stuck. We want to hear what you're thinking. I always say, if you don't bring your questions, that's on you. Bring your questions and we're going to help. So as I can say it right now, our next show, we're going to talk about health checks, Actuator, and how health checks work. And also, let's take it one step further and show a DB, database, salting, hashing passwords, an example of how to do that on top of what we're already doing with the example that we have here with JWTs.
Yep. Hello, Smith. Thanks for the input. No problem. Thank you for the question. Let me just take a look here. What else do I have? I will say, while we're waiting to see if we get any other questions, let me pop this over here and do one of these again. Next week, September 22nd, there is a cool little presentation happening. So Spring Recipes, a collection of common sense solutions. Nate Shuda and I gave this talk at KCDC. So we're going to give a little bit of an abridged version of that. We kind of go through a problem solution presentation style. So we present a problem. How do you do X in Spring? Here's the solution. We walk through the solution. Some of it is intro basics. Well, I hate to use the word basic. Simple compared to some of the advanced stuff. So we kind of give a bunch of intro level problems and solutions, and then we get into some more intermediate stuff that has to do with, cloud, working in the cloud. So if you're interested in that, go ahead and sign up for this. I'm going to go ahead and put this link in the chat and go ahead and check that out.
That's awesome. I'm looking for the properties to turn on all of my health checks, make my health checks visible, and then I can do a quick little demo.
The reason why start.spring.io doesn't allow to add the Spring native to boot 3 milestones is because the native support is already part of Spring Boot 3. The same way there are test and logging libs in Spring Boot without the need to opt in with an extra starter dependency.
Exactly. That is exactly right. All the things that you got out of the Spring native experimental package for Spring Boot 2.x, that's all going to be baked into Spring Boot 3. It's already ready already. So excellent. But that's also part of the reason, or it's one of the things that we're going to be doing is Spring Boot 3 is a refactor. We're going to rebase. You're going to be required to use Java 17. So if you haven't done that part already, that's probably something you can get started with now, is upgrading your projects to Java 17 so that they are ready when Spring Framework 6 and Spring Boot 3 go GA.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy. If you, I knew this already, but I just kind of noticed it this morning. But if you're there, the default is still 17, but 18 is an option, and 19 is going to be an option pretty soon. So 17 is starting to get a little old.
Yes. I see another topic. Did we show this one already? Talk about logging monitoring aspects. We did mention the micrometer stuff is coming out. Jonathan is our local expert, and I'll bet you that we could get him to come on the show and give us kind of a quick recap of, we want to talk about the 100 level stuff. Like, how do I get started? What's a good way to get started? There's tons of options. There's not really any shortcuts, but yeah, what's a good way to get started with concepts like logging and monitoring, etc.?
Yeah, that would be a great guest to have on, because he knows this stuff inside and out. And observability is a big theme for Spring Boot 3. So as we get closer to that, a lot of these changes that are happening have to do with observability. So, just that one-on-one level of like, what should I know? Like, what do I need to know to be dangerous?
Yeah. But great. We really like this type of insight. Like I said, we want to do this more. We want to get you unstuck. We want to give you the right path, the new path, the right way to go forward, instead of finding, what might be outdated, which would just make things more confusing. We want to get you on the right path.
Oh boy.
That was a harsh. We lost Ann.
Yep. You could still hear me, right?
Yes, I can still hear you.
Yeah. My camera just said, "Hey, I'm too hot. I'm too hot. I got to cool down." I'm like,
Technology's hard. I am still trying to turn on one of these endpoints.
All right, I'll let me throw this up here. I tweeted this out earlier, but just in case anybody doesn't know that this is an option, and I'm gonna go ahead and remove my camera.
I'm watching. Oh, I can't hear you though.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now.
All right. Let's just say, yeah. Okay. We'll just have a blank screen for a minute. Yeah. If you have a service, if you have this is in IntelliJ. If you have a couple of services in one application here, I have one window open. I have multiple services here. I have this to-do service. I have this dashboard service. And I'd rather not come in here and start these individually. So you could come in and run this application or run that application. There is a services panel down here that allows you to start individual services. Now with 2, it's not that big of a deal, but when you get into some of these distributed architectures and you have like 10 services that you need to start locally, this really helps out. So I know that I need to go ahead and start my dashboard application first, because that needs to be available for to-do service to be able to do its thing. So you can go ahead and start them individually, and you see the port here. So this one's running on 8080, this one's running on 8081. Just a nice way to kind of start your services from within IntelliJ. I believe this is a ultimate version, ultimate edition feature. But as people tell me, or as I've been telling people since I got into Spring, this is one of the things I pay for out of my pocket. Nobody pays for this for me. Work is not paying for this. A few bucks a month for something that makes me very productive. So
I'm pretty sure I've been using IntelliJ for it's close to 20 years now.
Yeah. I mean, it's great.
Yeah. I like it. It's done good things. I miss seeing your face, but we're doing good things. I feel like I appreciate all of the feedback that we're getting. This has been wonderful. Hopefully we're unlocking you. We want you to be moving forward, and we appreciate you bringing your questions. But if you still have questions, you're not asking your questions, that's on you. I want you to bring your questions. And that's how we're going to do. So normally, this is the way it's going to be. We're going to tell you what's on the calendar. We're going to show some stuff. We'll always do a demo, but we're always going to have time for your questions. And if we can't answer it right away, we'll make sure to get it on the agenda for one of our upcoming shows. My computer is operating really, really slow. I'm up in the clubhouse. I am not able to get things going. When I start it up, all my fans go, and things start to slow down.
Let's see. I got something. I just used Spring Boot 2.6, runs against Java 19, since Java 19 is going to be out in a week. Indeed.
Awesome. Yeah. There's so much stuff moving forward. One of the questions that I keep on hearing, or I keep on asking too, is like, what version of Java are you on? When I hear 6 or 8, I'm like, ooh, yeah. Why? Let's move forward so that we can all do the good things and keep moving.
All right. Any more questions? We have a packed house here. There's a lot of people in the room. Get your questions in.
Let's see. Let's go back and Kakarot 11. Like, if you're still here, maybe you can give me an idea of what you're interested in doing, and then maybe I can help out a little bit more. Bring that question back if you're around. If not, I will have a really interesting quick demo for the next show.
Not sure if this is the right place to ask, but structured concurrency and Project Loom, guess this will impact Spring and the configurations coming in the future. And this next one, like having by default virtual threads. So yeah, this is a big topic of conversation. I don't even think we know what this looks like yet. I think Jürgen mentioned this at Spring I/O in Barcelona, that there is a story developing around threads in Spring. Not sure. I don't know what that looks like yet, but I think the one theme that we can all kind of agree on here is that we're all excited for virtual threads. That's going to solve some problems, but it's not going to solve all the problems. And that doesn't replace Webflux or reactive programming in general, but it is going to be a very, I'm excited about it. It's going to help with some of those scaling issues, right? So yeah, I don't know what that looks like in Spring yet, but I'm just as excited as you are to see where that goes.
Yeah. And when it's out, this is where we'll kick the tires and show you the right way to use it. We don't want you to shoot yourself in the foot. But yeah, bring those questions. There's any of those kind of questions. They're that are open. Again, I don't know the answer. Dan probably knows better than I do. But if we don't, we know where to go. We've got Slack.
For those of us who don't have the services tool window in IDEA Ultimate, it can be because the first time IDEA detected there are 2 more services have started, tooltip like use services tool window pops up, and you might have told IDEA not to use that and just the run tool window instead. Yes, there is that little tooltip that pops up. If you hide it, sometimes it's hard to get back, but I believe you can go to window. There is a way to get that back. Store default layout, maybe. I don't know it off the top of my head, but there is a way to get that back. Tools. Yeah, there's got to be a way to get that back. But yes, if you kind of knock it away and dismiss it at first, it may not pop back up. But that services tab is very, very helpful because I have all my Spring Boot services in there. I have Docker services. If I have like a Docker Compose for a project, like all that stuff is in one place, which is nice.
Very nice. Do you have an example of what it looks like with a Docker Compose file? No pressure.
Yeah, I think so. Open, let's see, where is my test containers?
I asked that because for prod builds. Oh, this is a good question. Do you recommend using Maven Spring Boot build image for prod builds in CI/CD pipelines? Yes. Yes. Why would I recommend that? I don't like Docker files. If you build a Docker file, you've got to take care of that Docker file. If there is a CVE, you've got to be the one that patches it. I have scar tissue of having these Docker files for all the different services. And when something changes, then I was forced to go and change all of the Docker files and kick off all the new pipelines to build all the things. By using build image, I know that I'm getting a upstream image. That build pack has been, customized, optimized for my workload. And this is Spring, but also for everything else. I tend to lean towards build packs for those reasons. And and I can trust it. I can trust that it's optimized instead of putting in all of my own special configurations and doing those builds. It is a powerful way to move forward. It's one less thing that I need to worry about, and it has suited me well. So yes, I definitely put that into my pipelines. And I will say on top, my personal pipelines right now, they've got build image, and then they're also building a native image. Most of my projects have Spring Native. So I'm actually building both depending on what I'm trying to do and depending on the workload. But yeah, I'm definitely doing that. Yeah. So he says, in addition, versus some tools which under the hood do the same Paketo builds. I'm comfortable. It depends, right? I'm absolutely using the Spring Boot build image. And I don't know what else might be doing the Paketo build. Actually, no, I do. I've got workloads that are using something like KPack. But again, still, the thing that I'm going to lean into is using those build packs, using those Paketo build packs, for example, versus building my own Docker files. But yeah, it depends on what you're trying to accomplish. Yeah.
And I mean, unless you're writing Docker files every single day, that's something you're going to have to go look up. And, that just doesn't seem like a fun way to spend some time.
Oh, yeah. So, Alexander, yes, I've not seen Spring Boot 3 yet. You can go and grab the milestone release. A lot of things are going to be really simple. One of the big upgrade changes is you have to be on Java 17. That's the big thing. There are going to be other changes along the way. But yeah, take it for a spin. Take it for a spin early. I have a lot of examples that work pretty much identically, other than changing the versions on the POM file between the two. But yeah, the further you expand, the more things that you're pulling in, the more likely you're going to have changes.
The other big change is we're moving to Jakarta, the Jakarta EE package. So moving away from Java X namespace to the Jakarta namespace. Usually you can just find and replace that. IntelliJ has a really good And instead of just a find and replace, it will. There's a tool to replace all of those packages, because some of them are not. Some of them you don't remove. So IntelliJ does a really good job of that. So check that out. But yeah, those are the two kind of big ones that stand out to me.
Is the command line Maven Spring Boot build image designed for prod builds? Yes. Right. That's the purpose. Those build packs are designed for production ready workloads. So yeah, you have all the confidence. I'm giving you all the confidence that you need to go and use those build packs in production. Excellent. Yes. ++ JWTs Jakarta. That will be. But there are tools. There are tools. I'm pretty sure IntelliJ is going to make that really easy for you. And I'm sure others will as well, automatically updating those packages.
Yep. And I think that's, I like to, I'm a half glass full kind of guy too. Sure, you got to change this stuff, change these packages, but Jakarta going forward, all of these like classes and libraries that have been kind of stagnant for years now get some like life breathed into them, right? Like we get to start evolving these APIs, which I'm really excited about. So again, half glass full, I think that's really good going forward.
Indeed. Good thing with Spring Boot build image is that the Spring team makes sure that the Paketo build pack works with the given boot versions. Yes, that's one of the magic things that you get. They curate. We make sure that everything works together. So yeah, yes, thank you, Spring team, and all the work that they put in to making our lives a little bit easier.
All right, I got a little demo for you. You asked for. So I have a project that has a Docker Compose in it. It's just simply listing out some services. There's one DB service. It's a Postgres Alpine image. So if I go in and I run this, you can see it here in my services tab. It will go ahead and start that up. You can see it under here. I have DB. There is a reading list DB, and everything starts up. So you can restart from here, stop, open a terminal. And again, once you have multiple services, if you have multiple like Docker Compose files and different services, this is a really nice place to kind of contain all that stuff.
Yeah. Oh no, the camera again.
I'm not sure what's going on here today.
Now, there's another question here, and I don't have the answer to this. Did Spring Boot Migrator project start releasing milestones to test migration updates? I don't know the answer to that. And I know I've heard some conversations in passing, but I don't know the answer. So I'm putting that on my list as something that we should probably, help out with going forward. So we'll bring that. I don't have the answer for you today, but I will try to get my hands on the answer for that. Get some notes.
Another question. Why is Spring moving away from OpenFeign? So I don't know the answer. I don't know that it's moving away from OpenFeign. I don't think OpenFeign's going anywhere. So I know that Spring Boot 3, Spring Framework 6 introduces the idea of declarative HTTP clients. I don't know if that completely replaces this, but I could be wrong. So I will ask if there's if that is indeed the case, and we'll get you an answer on that. I just know that yes, in Spring Framework 3 or Spring Boot 3 and Spring Framework 6 does HTTP declarative clients are a really nice way to simply declare an interface and make that process of making a client call to somewhere else very easy. So I will ask about that, I just think there's a alternative method coming, which is going to be very nice. There are no plans for reactive integration. Heard from Olga in the conferences. Maybe that's the reason then. because there is no reactive version. So again, I'll find out.
Yeah.
It's feature complete now. Spring Cloud retrofit is recommended.
Awesome. Excellent. What else? What else is on? We're taking notes. We got some things to come back and show off. What else? What else are you facing with? Are you facing today? What are you working on? And how can we help? This has been great. We got a lot of good, which I think will actually be really easy to show and demonstrate. And yeah, and we have a good reach out for Jonathan to come in and give us some quick review on, yeah, everything, observability, logging, monitoring, and more. IntelliJ.
Yes.
There you go. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I'll see if maybe I'll try and put a demo of that together as well. But yes, you don't just have to go in there and say, find and replace all. IntelliJ has a tool for that, similar to the JUnit 4 to JUnit 5 example. So yes, you can migrate from, and again, it's not just for Spring, right? It's for any Java project that's moving from JavaX to Jakarta. So
yes. Questions. This has been awesome. This has been wonderful, and this helps us moving forward for the next, for the rest of the year. We are looking forward to SpringOne. We want to make sure that you are all caught up and you are unblocked, so that all the amazing things that you're going to learn at SpringOne, you can take and apply them immediately. So that's one of my goals. My personal goal is I want you to be unblocked by the time SpringOne is here.
Oh, speaking of, some of the invites have been going out, and I had the pleasure of being on some of the selection committees and just seeing the speakers that are getting accepted. Oh, man, I'm so excited. There are so many great talks that I was already going, oh, I want to see that one and that one and that one. So there's no schedule put together yet, but speaker invites are starting to go out. So it's exciting. We're getting closer and closer. So
we are getting closer. I am also on one of those committees, and I'm very excited about our track as well. It's going to be amazing. I think it's hands down going to be the best SpringOne ever.
Yeah, it's been a while since we've all been in person, so I'm excited.
Ooh, here's another good question. Ask your questions. They're all good questions. Do you guys have any resources on multi-tenancy? Now, this one, that's a big word, and it means a lot of things to different people. When I think multi-tenancy, hey, I've got different people coming in, or different consumers or customers or entities or third parties coming in and using the same resources. How do I identify who is consuming a resource? How do I allow multiple entities to consume use the same software or infrastructure and deliver specific outcomes? I would be happy to dig in. Can you tell me any more about what are you running into? What are you facing? Because security and how you're handling security around your resources, how you're providing access to your resources, the difference between authorization and authentication, like how are you making those decisions? Tell us what you're getting into, and maybe we can dig into that a little bit. Here we go. Let's keep this. Distributed tracing, W3C, trace context. Goal is to see traces in the logs. Spring Sleuth is not helping with a larger distributed system. New Relic is an option we are looking into. Suggestions. Oh, yes. See, Jonathan. There are a lot of there's a lot of improvements. And I know that Micrometer, the things that we're getting out of Spring Sleuth and the other packages, we've made a lot of improvements around distributed tracing. So this, now that we've heard of multiple questions around this, we can definitely show some of these good examples and what we can do. You bring up New Relic as an example. We can show how it might look and behave different across these different systems and where you might run into those corner cases. So yeah, this is a great question. But I definitely lean in to what Spring provides out of the box. And I think that, yeah, we can definitely show you an example of getting started and how to go forward. There we go. Micrometer tracing. Yeah, we got lots of stuff to show. Lots of stuff to show.
Yeah, I've seen Jonathan speak on this before, and I still like it's one of the areas that I need to get better, like learn more about. So we got to talk to him and see if we can get him on the show.
This is great. This has been great, Dan. It's been a great show, even with our technical difficulties.
Yeah.
I hope people are getting unstuck. It feels like we're getting a lot of great questions. We've got a lot of work on our side. We want to make sure that these types of questions, which we've actually, we've tackled a lot of this already in the past. We want to make sure that you, our audience, are able to move forward with the same kind of confidence. So we've got some work to do to share some of these things with you and try to help make that path forward easy. So yeah, I'm looking forward to what we've got coming.
Yeah. So like I said, we will, couple of things. We'll get some show notes added to this. So if you head over to the Tanzu Developer Center and look at Spring Office Hours for episode 11, we will put some notes there if you want to get some links to things that we've talked about. 2, we are going to schedule a episode 12 for a week from today, same time, same bad channel. So we'll get that scheduled, and we'll probably schedule the next 2, because not next week, but then the following week, both the spring projects will be out, and maybe we could start to show off some of that native stuff without having to pull in extra bits. So that'll be fun to show off. We'll also talk to our friend Jonathan and see if we can get him on in the near future and talk about observability and what's coming in Spring Boot 3. So.
Yes, indeed. Anbu, Jazz or Jack, either one. Pump, Jazz, Jack, they all work. We're happy that you're here. Happy that you're here.
Just a quick question. Link to the Tanzu Developer Center. Sure. Got that for you. Just tanzu.vmware.com/developer. I'll put that in the chat. But yeah, thanks again, everyone, for showing up. Thanks for your questions. This is a really good show. Again, we'll get more consistent with these. We hope to see you every week. We'll see you next Tuesday at 3:30 Eastern Time, and we'll continue this journey together. So with that, bring your questions, come back next week, and we'll see if we can get them answered. More demos in the pipeline, and we'll talk about what's new in spring. We'll see you next week.
Take care.